Welcome, everybody, to the AG Next Gen Leaders podcast, where we encourage, equip, and empower you as a next gen leader to effectively be a disciple of Jesus Christ who makes disciples of Jesus Christ. We have a really exciting episode on the AG Next Gen Leaders podcast. I am with my incredible friend, Julie Pratt, who is the National KidMin Discipleship Director. Julie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. This is going to be a great conversation.
Julie is my fellow adventurer. I think even,
That's right.
Julie, you are more adventurous than I am.
I have a mission to see the world.
I am amazed. I have just loved getting to know you this past, I guess, year and a half or so here at the national office. But as we dive into, because we really have some really incredible content today that we want to discuss. But Julie, I want to ask you first. You are a strong leader. I watch you in rooms and in meetings and in conversations. You are extremely gifted in leadership, in your speaking abilities. When did you first notice that you were like, oh, I have some leadership ability in me? When do you recall that?
I don't know if I can recall the moment, but I think I've known a lot of my life. I have a strong personality, which is good, right? And I think even in middle school and high school, the way that played out was through student council and some of those spaces. So I think where I would say I could put a finger on a moment would be in Bible college. And it was actually just in the altar and just praying about what is this thing called calling to ministry. I actually was raised as a pastor's kid, so I wasn't unfamiliar, but I was still trying to work it out for myself. And I think just in my time with God, he spoke some things to me that I knew meant leadership. And then I've spent the rest of my adult life trying to be a student of leadership. What does that look like? What does that mean when you're in a team? All of those realities. So I guess the answer is most of my life, but college was a moment where I made a real decision.
Because I do think there's maybe not a difference, but there are definitely people who feel called to minister, and then there are people who feel called to lead.
Yeah, I would say, I would even add to that. I don't know if you're into the Enneagram at all. I'm a 7 naturally. So if you know what a 7 is, we are kind of the all over the place personality. Like I like to use the pinball machine as my example. If left to my natural state, I am all over the place. But when I got into my first full-time ministry position, I realized that didn't serve well to be a leader that was like that. And I remember making a decision that I wanted to steward the call well. And so I really got serious about, okay, if that is how God designed me as a 7, as a pinball, it's just like, but I'm going to steward that.
Yeah.
I have to find some ways that work. And so for me, that meant really digging into skill sets and strengths and weaknesses and what kind of habits and practices I needed to put into place to help me to be strong in the areas of weakness and vice versa. And so I would say that's even a part of it for me. I'm a systems person because I need to steward that 7 in me.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with my superintendent. Shout out to Rick and Susan Ross in North Carolina. Love them so much.
Them.
And I remember having a conversation with him about being administrative. So I wouldn't say I'm a 7. I've got 7 in me, mostly 3. But I am kind of like you know, where I do have those pinball moments. I had a conversation with somebody today, and I'm standing at their desk, and they're talking to me about one thing, and my mind is just
1,000%.
Maybe that's ADHD. I don't know, but I remember having a conversation with Rick, and he was pointing out the administrative side in me. Now, I mean, I have had to work at it as well. I do think it's a strength. I don't think it comes to me naturally, but because he pointed out, he said, you've had to work on this because, it's maybe not a part of your personality, but I feel that in my toenails.
Yes. Well, and because I have worked on that, I'm a wing 7, wing 8 now, which 8 is very administrative.
Yes.
So that has definitely grown in me because of it.
So what year were you in college?
I went in fall of 1993.
Okay.
Had to think about that for a second.
So I'm just thinking about being a woman in the early 90s, feeling a call to ministry. I mean, I do think, we've come a long way with helping women to feel called into ministry and where God has them.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your ministry background. Yeah. Because even being called into ministry as a female in the early 90s, that took some guts.
Yeah. It wasn't as accessible.
Yeah.
Even though historically the Assemblies of God is very much about women in leadership, in practicality, it didn't always play out that way.
Sure.
And I'll say I never actually saw a woman in ministry until I was in college.
Wow.
So I didn't even see it modeled.
As a pastor's kid?
As a pastor's kid, I never saw a credentialed woman in ministry. I saw plenty of pastors' wives who were incredibly gifted, right? But to be a credentialed woman in ministry, I didn't see that until I was in college.
Wow.
So, and then my husband and I got married, and both he and I are now ordained. We both had a call in our life. And so as soon as we exited Bible college, we started pursuing credentials, because that's what you do. And I realized pretty quickly that it was going to be much harder for me to get credentialed than my husband. Not because we weren't both we were both qualified, right? But because in practice that wasn't as common. And I realized that he was going to easily get his credential, and I was going to have to work a little harder. And in fact, what ended up happening is I just abandoned it for a lot of years. And his credential served as an umbrella. Yeah. I didn't love that, but it served as an umbrella for a lot of years. And by a lot, I would say probably 20 years.
So our stories are very similar. I have shared this on one of these episodes before, but I think very similar, Julie. I graduated in high school in 94, went to Bible college in 96. The Lord, so before I ever met my husband, the Lord clearly called me to youth ministry. Yeah. And so I'm very thankful for that. Yeah. Because it helped, you know, kind of give me a little tunnel vision. But I was very much, okay, this is what the Lord has called me to. And I remember the college counselor said, because I entered church ministries degree with a specialization in youth. And as I was getting ready to graduate, she asked me, she said, do you want to pursue credentials? Because that's what church ministry, biblical ministries degrees, you know, did. And I can't remember if I was engaged, but I was dating my soon-to-be husband at the time. He was also in youth ministry. He was already credentialed. Yeah. And I remember thinking, gosh, do I need my credentials? Right. Now, if a female asked me that today, I'd be like, yes, 100%. Right now. Yes. But I remember thinking,
culturally, that was still a question many of us asked.
Do I need that? I'm going to have to give more time.
What are we going to be able to do?
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
And so I, like you, I abandoned it. And, you know, I'm sure maybe financially it was like, oh, we both have to pay tithe. You know, that was a little scary when you only made.
There's some practical reasons for sure.
But it wasn't until my superintendent was, and I was working at the district office serving, my husband and I were serving as district youth directors, and he looked at me and he kind of looked at my paperwork and was like, why are you not credentialed? He saw me preaching, teaching, you know, operating, and he was like, and we had up until this point had already been in ministry 20 years. Yeah. What do you think that is? Yeah. I mean, you've kind of already said it, but.
Yeah, I think it was culture. I think our culture didn't necessarily catch up to our theology. And so I'm happy to say that we have made huge strides. In fact, my conversation took place with Donna Barrett, our now General Secretary, when we were all in Ohio. She was an executive presbyter with our state, and took me out to lunch, and it was a delightful lunch until she said, same thing, why aren't you credentialed? And I think that was the first time I said, yeah, why aren't I? And that just triggered something in me. I knew I was called. I was living in the call, but I didn't have the credentials in place. And I, again, I would echo what you say. Yeah. Every woman living in the call should be pursuing their credential with the Assemblies of God.
Yeah. So I want to jump back to that conversation.
Yeah.
But Julie, tell us really quickly, tell us your ministry background. You've been in different places, served in different churches. Take us through, so you have the calling in college. Yeah. Talk us through some of your ministry background.
Yeah, so my husband and I married and immediately went into youth ministry together. We were youth pastors for a number of years. We've done it all. Yeah. And some of that is because we ultimately realized we had very divergent calls. And the way that's played out is my husband went from being a youth pastor to being an executive pastor, an administrative pastor. And I have zero interest in that. And so I realized, how am I going to fulfill my call? Sure. And so I started to become involved in the areas that were available to me. And as soon as we had kids, that was children's ministry. And so I would freely sit here and say, I have all known for years and years that I was called, but I didn't necessarily feel a very clear, it's to be kids ministry, until I had my own kids. And then I had a vested interest in it. Sure. And that was a place I could serve. And so I did that for a lot of years until we were in Ohio. And I was a family pastor in Ohio for a number of years, and then felt like God was pressing on me to pastor my community in which I actually lived. It was going through some really difficult seasons. And I felt like God was just specifically saying, I want you to be a pastor to this community. And for us, what that looked like was church planting. And so we entered into a church planting process, and I became the lead pastor of a church, planted, and we led that church all the way through till what we call general council status, which means they're an established sovereign church. And then I felt like God said, okay, now you can go back into kids ministry. And so I went back into that until I landed here. So I feel like in all of those various scenarios, I have pastored the next generation and their families. So for me, it feels like I have been in the same place of ministry all of those years, but from a different seat on the bus.
Wow. So I think we've experienced this as females in ministry in different ways, but talk to us about what it feels like to be the only female in a room full of men. And that can look different, whether you're on church staff, but keeping in the church ministry context, what does that feel like? What's been your experience with that?
Yeah. Early in my years of ministry leadership, I would get advice, and you may have received the same advice. I would get advice like, have a meeting before the meeting with a guy, and then let that person present your proposals. Or if you want to be heard, lower your voice, because men respond to lower voices. Wow. And none of those things are authentically me. Right. And I would try those tactics with kind of negligible results. Sure. But I'll never forget a kids pastor who at the time was a goat, right? He had been in, at that point, ministry to kids for 40-something years. He's still alive. He's definitely retired now, but so knowledgeable. And I'll never forget, he said to me, you want to enter the room in the way you want to be received. He said, if you want to be received like a clown, we're kids pastors, right? So from the vein of kids pastors, if you want to be received like a clown, come in like a clown. So in children's church, what he's saying is, if that's what you're going to do, if that's a character you're going to play, be all in. Like, don't go halfway on that. But then he said, but if you want to be received as a leader, enter the room as a leader. And that just stuck with me because as I explored the idea of what is a leader is a practitioner. They know their ministry, they know their community, and they are a practitioner of that particular area of ministry. For us, kids ministry has so many skills, creative skills, but also delivery skills. But all of that has to be centered around our knowledge of our kids and cognitive development and of our community and the community needs. And I have realized that's a big part of the answer to the question you asked. When you come to the table, you're in a room full of men. The way that you are heard is by being a leader. And the way that you're a leader is by being a practitioner. And so when they start to ask the questions, you know the answers to them because you've done your work. You have come to the table having done the work of a leader, and you contribute in ways that bring value, very quickly your voice brings value. And then it is heard. It's listened to. So I never show up to a meeting unprepared anymore. I take the time to make sure I know what it is that I'm representing, whatever that might be, or my ministry or the project or whatever in a meeting. And it comes with credibility and authority.
Yes. I have said to females on numerous occasions, you do not want a seat at this table, or any table for that matter, because you are a female.
Yes.
If we are just a check mark because we're meeting some standard, that's not why we want a seat at the table. We want a seat at the table because we have done the work to get there.
Yes, 100%. I would agree. I don't want any opportunity just because of my gender.
Yeah.
I want to have been given that opportunity. I want that door to be opened to me because God's favor and the work of a leader has shown that possible.
Advice that was given to you. I do think it's interesting that it was from a man. I had a man, besides my husband, my biggest cheerleader who has opened up incredible doors for me, but it was also my superintendent that, was my biggest cheerleader. It's interesting that it was, a man that gave you that incredible advice.
I mean, it's an important point to make while we talk about how different and maybe difficult it is to be a woman in ministry. And I would say, especially in our area of Next Gen Ministry, because of the extra obligations that it brings, there are absolutely men in leadership around the country who believe in this and who can help us. But we have to, in our process of looking or interviewing or whatever, we have to ask right questions. We have to bring up those realities. I have, the reality of a spouse who's also ordained and whose skill set is in a completely different area. So for me, many years it was, my husband isn't going to be the additional add-on in this. Let's make sure that's okay. There's the reality of I was myself a mom. Same for you, right? We were raising kids while in ministry. It comes with realities.
Yeah.
And I had one special needs child. It comes with realities. But there are absolutely men in leadership who believe in women in leadership and who are interested in helping to open the door wider for us.
I am so thankful for our general superintendent, Doug Clay.
So much.
Who just believes in women in ministry, the calling of God. I'm just so thankful as you say that. I'm thinking of him and I'm just so thankful.
Agreed. He's from Ohio, by the way. Just a side note, but I agree. And I think that's why when we landed in Ohio, he was a leader in Ohio before he was here in the national office. He helped to create a culture that when I came into Ohio, he had already come to the national office, but that was the culture and the DNA. And for the first time, I really realized I can do this. And here's a question I'll ask you. Why? Why should we get credentialed?
It's on my question list.
So let's ask that.
Let's ask it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, as our general superintendent from his seat says, we believe in women in ministry. We believe in the gifting that God has given. And we were in college around the same time. And I think about this time that we are in right now as a next gen leader and communicating to 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 22-year-olds who feel the call of God on their life.
10-year-olds. 8-year-olds, even younger.
Sorry, I have a youth ministry mind. That's where my brain automatically goes.
It does start quite young now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Julie, what would you say to that 10-year-old girl who comes up to you as a camp speaker and says, I feel the call of God on my life. What should I do? What would you say?
I say start now.
Yeah.
And I always have conversations with kids pastors about make it possible for them to start serving. So much of what we do in ministry is about serving, right? So giving them opportunity to be a part of the inner workings of ministry is one of the best ways you can feed that call. Speak life over that call, affirm that call, do the I see in you conversations as regularly as you can. Because the more you call to life that dream, the more it becomes a reality to them and the more committed they are to that call as they go through the inevitable bumps of middle school, high school, young adulthood.
Yeah.
It really helps to seal that in their heart. But then I would answer the why do we get credentialed? I would say, based on my experience, I think it brings credibility
100%.
to our call. And that's 100%. Important. And I would say...
Whether you're male or female.
Whether you're male or female. But if we're talking from the perspective of being women in ministry and especially in next-gen ministry, it brings so much credibility to what we're doing. And in my personal experience, it opened the door to greater opportunity.
100%.
I loved and still love local church ministry. But as soon as I had credentials, there was just so much more that was available. And even just the opportunity to speak on a greater level. So while I was, for a lot of years, in rooms with a couple of men as staff, I started to be in large auditoriums full of men and get to speak to that. And it just brought the opportunity to bring a focus into kids ministry and what kids ministry is to the church. And, and that's my sphere and passion point. So many things that I am today and opportunities that I have today are because I pursued those credentials.
I would echo that. I don't think the doors would have opened for me. Everybody has, their opinions and their thoughts. Why should I be a part of a fellowship? Why do I need credentials? But I would echo, I don't think I would be in headquarters today if I had not fallen through with the credentialing process. The open doors that it has afforded. And I have sat in rooms, we may need to edit this out later, but I have sat in rooms and in conversations where we're going through lists of people, looking for speakers. And if they are not credentialed, because it is our fellowship. It is our body saying, this is who we are, our cooperative fellowship. I would echo what you said.
What else I would add is one of the conversation points we hear so much in Next Gen ministry is we feel like we're not valued among our church staff team or within our church ministry departments. We use, a lot of we get dumped in the basement kind of. I think when you as a leader choose to get your credential, you bring credibility to your ministry in your local church. And you show that this space, these kids or teens are of such importance that it's worth me doing the work to get my credential so that I can provide the highest quality discipleship process for these kids and students.
So good. So talk to me about thinking about being the only female in a room, full of men. And talk to me about what's it been like for you as you have just reflect back on your calling to the young lady who may be listening right now, who maybe, and for you, it wasn't necessarily kids ministry right away. For me, it was youth ministry right away.
Yeah.
But she's a female and she's listening to this podcast right now.
Yeah.
And she's saying, I'm feeling the call. Maybe it's to young adults, maybe, who knows? And you alluded to it at the beginning of this podcast. You said that kids ministry, you had kids, so kids ministry was kind of a natural place for you to fit in, to be a part of in that ministry. From a youth ministry perspective, I've often seen females, especially, almost sliding into kids ministry because that's the only place that they felt like they could serve. The other departments or was not afforded to them.
Yeah.
What's your thought on that?
Statistically, kids ministry is one of the most female-heavy led areas of ministry in a local church. And I really do believe it's because of that. It's because there are young ladies who feel called to the ministry, but the only place that seems to be available to them is in kids ministry. And I'm a kids min leader, right? I believe in kids ministry and the value of kids ministry.
You're like, we need more workers.
We need more leaders.
Yeah, 100%.
But for young ladies who feel called to the ministry and not necessarily to kids ministry, I understand that sometimes that's the only place that is given to them. So my advice really would be to the male leaders listening to this podcast right now. And I would say, pay attention to your young and female leaders who know God has called them to something and consider how you can open the door wider for them. They need an individual to open that door and to say, where do you feel like God has called you? Let's do what we can to get you in it. And then I would say, if where you find yourself is in kids ministry, whatever your hand finds to do, do as unto the Lord. Children's ministry is a major space in the ministry world right now. We're recognizing that so many of our young adults made their decisions on faith, their core convictions, before the age of 10. So you have the opportunity to make great impact on the next generation. And so I would also say, lean into it, but I just think at the end of the day, men, in many ways, and women, if you are in a seat like you and I, we have an opportunity here to open that door wider and to help them get into the area of ministry they feel like God is calling them to. But I think it's on us. I think it's a responsibility, and I take it very personally to try to open those doors wider. Be encouraged. Don't be discouraged. God's call is real and valid, and he will make a way. So good. So let's talk just really quickly, just a final thought that, leadership thought. Sometimes females in ministry, there is, I don't know if you would say it's insecurity, but we feel threatened at times by each other. And so often, instead of encouraging and opening the door for each other, and recognizing that gifting, oftentimes we close that door because we feel threatened. And we feel, speak into that. We've talked about men encouraging women in ministry and opening those doors, but also to the females, with each other. We need each other.
Yes.
We need each other. And one of the best ways that we can help women in ministry is to champion each other. And that's something that I love about you. I think our team that has a number of women leaders does really well. We are fans of each other. And we champion each other, including what we see as each other's strengths. And recognizing, hey, can I come in and help you in an area that might be less comfortable? And we all have those too.
Sure.
And I think that's a decision.
Yeah.
Sometimes I talk about, sometimes it's about choice and action. Make a choice and act on it. Choose today that as a woman in ministry, you're going to champion other women in ministry and act on it every single day. Just do it. It is sometimes as simple as that.
So good. Julie, thank you. Thank you for, in a season when, you're in college and, maybe the opportunities were not as wide open as they are now in 2023. Thank you for being courageous. And because I watch you, Julie, I watch you, and you are not only my friend, but you're my teammate in ministry, and it's an honor to run with you as we help lead this next generation. God is he's so good.
Yes.
And I'm excited to just see what God has for you. This is my plug for the Next Gen Leaders Conference. Julie Pratt is going to be there. Her and Ellie Mariquin will be doing a masterclass.
We will.
Amazing. And you're rolling out just an incredible, it's
amazing.
It's amazing.
It's an amazing tool. My role in KidMin is children's discipleship. So we could have a whole podcast on that, and maybe we will. But a lot of really incredible tools and resources are coming out very soon.
Yeah. So don't miss it. Make sure you register. I don't know when you're listening to this. If you're listening to this in 2025, sorry, the conference has already passed. We will have another one in 2026.
But those tools will still be there.
Those tools will still be there. So make sure you go check it out at nextgen.ag.org. Julie, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me talk about something outside of just kids ministry.
Well, you're an incredible woman. You're incredible in ministry, and I just see Jesus.
Oh, thank you.
All
Likewise.
over you. So it's just exciting to run with you. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. We hope that you'll join us again for another impactful episode on growing as a next gen leader. We get to do this,
We
right?
get to do this.
Holy moly. Jesus has called us to make disciples of him. So be a disciple-making leader who makes disciples of Jesus Christ. We'll see you next time.